dog. What's great for a snack and fits on your back? It's long, long, long. It's long, long. It's big, it's heavy, it's wood. It's long, long. It's better than that, it's good. Everyone wants a log. You're gonna love it long. Come on and get your log. Everyone needs a log.
Log from Blammo.
Alright, the Asylum Demon, the tutorial boss of Dark Souls, and arguably the first death most new players encounter right after spending about an hour creating their character. But although he is meant to be circumvented and then taken down by jumping down using your class-specific starting weapon, there is an interesting reward for those who manage to slug through a 15-minute endurance test using the Straightsword hilt, or by simply using black firebombs as a starting gift. And that reward is a massive wooden hammer. But I can tell you from experience that having massive wood is hard to handle, and requires a ton of experience points in the form of souls to meet the stat requirements, meaning it would take a while before you can actually use it. Well, even so, at least you can walk like a badass logging this massive log on your shoulder.
Only in the ancient legends it is stated.
My tiny little nipples went to France.
But what if we ignore the strength requirements altogether while trying to beat the game using only this weapon for damage? Yeah, the problem with that is that it kind of doesn't do any damage. And rather than your character swinging a weapon, it's more like it's the weapon swinging your character around. Yeah, that's not going to work. So let's first collect any poppable souls so that we can upgrade it. Now, fortunately, although we don't have access to this weapon's full moveset, meaning no strong or roll attacks, but we can still backstab with it, which is useful at least when buffed with the power of gravity. And speaking of buffs, you're probably thinking that this will be similar to my Straightsword hilt only guide, where practically all the damage came from the magic weapon spell. But what if we don't use that, nor Sunlight or Darkmoon Blade? Not even Resonance. Not even as a restriction, it simply wouldn't even be the best approach to begin with. Although it is quite understandable that you would think that, because even after we collect enough souls to buy Titanite shards, upgrading the weapon wouldn't increase the damage by any significant amount because of the damage penalty. Meaning we still have no functional way to attack. But we can rely on expertly dodging enemy attacks in the meantime. Doesn't mean we can neglect upgrading a weapon, but for this one it's quite expensive. So we'll need even more souls to consume. Yeah, that sounds weird, consuming souls. Kinda makes you wonder what consuming souls would even taste like. Maybe lemon flavored. Well, while we're here anyway, given how slow I swing and how massive and heavy my wood is, meaning that protection, as in armor, is not feasible, I thought I would pick up the wolf's ring for poise. Unfortunately, that would require us to use blunt force, minus the actual force behind it, to cut through a tree. Which I suppose is how the axe was invented in our ancient past. I mean, I can just imagine my ancestor behind a tree and some other tribesman was like, yeah, perhaps adding a sharp blade to that stick would be a slightly more pragmatic addition to the size, shape, materials and forces in question. And then the first guy responded by saying, dude, get the fuck out of here, I'm not chopping wood, I'm trying to take a shit. Regardless, the Wolf's Ring can not only prevent our own very slow attack from getting cancelled, but can also help us move through areas while under attack without having a viable attack of our own. Although our obvious priority is to change that. But not from the help of Swole Santa here, nor Vamus or the Giant, but rather from a fourth blacksmith who is so easily forgotten, namely Rickard of Vinheim. Now up to +5 will not make any difference, but if we go down into Blighttown and pick up green titanite, it will be a different story. On top of that, there are some very nice expensive solder pops here, and if we go down into the Great Hollow, not only can we pick up the Chlorantine Ring, which is helpful when the Grassgrass shield is too heavy, but in this area there are several titanite chunks, and it's specifically the blue chunks that we're after. And yes, there are 2 of them, it's easy to miss the second one, but it's located near a group of basilisks. And no, not to worry, you can just homer the bone back after picking excuse me? What the fuck? Okay, so an additional challenge to this run is apparently that we're also playing with only half a life bar. Damn it, and no cling ring in sight. Well, I suppose we just have to make do for now, but at least when we go back to Rickard, we can upgrade to +6 down the magic path. But how would that actually help us? Well, because of how the damage penalty works when adding split damage to a weapon. Because the lack of damage comes from not meeting the strength requirement, But this weapon does not have any intelligence requirement. So the magic damage you add, which then scales with intelligence, is not penalized. Meaning we have a melee weapon that almost exclusively does magic damage.
Hello, boys! I'm back!
Obviously not as good as it would normally be, of course, but it does make up for the very lengthy and unwieldy swing of this weapon. Of course, anytime we miss, we are completely vulnerable due to the extreme recovery animation, whereas when you hit your target, you bounce off, and you will at least recover much quicker, although still quite slow. So now all we need to do is go back down into Blighttown and farm the leeches. So that shouldn't take too long, right? Ow, fuck. Okay, maybe this will take a little longer than I thought. So, after finally getting the upgrade stones we needed, we can reinforce our weapon all the way to magic +5. So basically the equivalent of a standard +10 weapon. However, we can take it even further beyond, and although that doesn't require us to scream for several minutes straight, it will require us to buy the Crest of Artorias, which costs a whopping 20,000 souls. Fortunately, the Stray Demon drops exactly that number, and we will have to go back to the asylum anyway, because that allows us to easily cure our curse by trading a red cracked orb for a stone of ephemeral eyes, or whatever it's called in this game. Or maybe not so easily, because even with a shield, our attack still takes ages to come out. And let's face it, only gravity is more powerful than a torch hollow. So maybe we can actually use that to our advantage. Because you can in fact sort of circumvent them in a way that I honestly never even really thought about before. Well, with the curse cured, we have our full health bar back, but it's still at base level vitality. Fortunately, the Stray Demon is very easy to deal with, but there is a little bit of an issue fighting this boss with a strength weapon you lack the strength requirements for. When it comes to a dexterity weapon you fill the stats for, it will almost work the same using this method of relying on split damage. The only difference then is that you cannot combo, because each time you attack, your weapon will bounce. But the actual attack animation is the same. However, with a strength weapon, if you miss, you go through a very lengthy recovery animation, leaving you completely vulnerable. So there's not merely a strict timing issue, because the swing speed is already very low, but it's paramount that whatever you do not miss your attack. And that's unfortunately easier said than done, because you will have to consciously position yourself towards the enemy, as merely locking on or just pointing your character in the general direction is not always enough, as you will see throughout this entire playthrough. Experientially at least, it feels a bit like you're attacking to your side rather than directly in front of you. But in case of the Stray Demon, the overhead explosion gives you just enough time to safely get an attack in, and the same applies for the butt slam, although the timing is a bit stricter because of the lingering hitbox. And the quick attack simply shouldn't be used for an attack of your own. And hey, for a boss with a large health pool, our damage output is definitely more than sufficient. So with a little patience, we can acquire our 20k to increase our damage even further. And we're definitely going to need that, given the high risk that we take with each attack. When your attack is this awkward, you definitely want to make it count and get as much damage out of it as you can. And with the Crest of Artorias, we can use the blue titanite chunks that we picked up earlier, by grabbing the enchanted amber from the chest, guarded by some mushrooms. Which is quite poetic in a way, that through mushrooms you will get to have a magical experience. Although of course the downside is that you will end up with a massive headache as a result. Now, speaking of blue titanite chunks, in principle we could get to +9 by farming the blue crystal golems. But they are incredibly magic resistant, so not easy to farm. However, you can get the Hydra to water the field so that you can harvest the results. Although there weren't any results unfortunately, because the drop rate is low. And after the green titanite farming session, I wasn't exactly in the mood to try again. But to be fair, upgrading that high is kind of overkill anyway. In fact, despite Havel's magic resistance, we can still easily acquire Havel's ring by making use of parries, as riposting, just like backstabs, are still available attacks despite our limited moveset. So unlike with my previous Dark Souls 1 challenge, the Pike Charge only run, I was at least hopeful this time for the final confrontation in this playthrough. So after visiting Rickard, we had the equivalent of a +12 weapon, although not with the comparable damage output of course, but at least without even fighting a single mandatory boss. Regardless, what would be useful other than Havel's ring would be the Fab ring, so that we have enough endurance to fast roll while also having the crest shield on our back. And of course some additional health that allows us to first focus on intelligence over vitality and endurance until later. Now of course you could get Lautrec to free himself by defeating the Gargoyles first, but by freeing him ourselves we can get the ring before fighting the Gargoyles. And gaining Lautrec's respect in the process. Well, not sure if he would want that, and I'm even less sure that he would bow down in respect, but he will at least take a knee. So then it was finally time for the Gargoyles, and with a plus stealth weapon, we could at least do a lot of damage. However, the real issue was attack speed, or better said, the lack thereof, leaving me vulnerable even when getting a hit in, and even more vulnerable whenever I miss and have to wait longer than for an average woman to get ready to go anywhere while her husband fell asleep waiting in the car. And speaking of going anywhere, because I smash so slowly, it's quite likely for the Gargoyles to dodge away in time. Well, in a sense it's still better than the pike charge, since they didn't even need to dodge that one, given that most of the time it didn't even go in that general direction to begin with. But at least this time, when I managed to hit them, I would hit them very hard because of all the prep work. Now of course this damage output is not going to last, since it's still only about half what this weapon is capable of doing. So since I had to go back to Blighttown anyway, I wanted to pick up Power Within for the late game bosses, especially the DLC ones with their high magic resistance. Although it turned out that it wasn't necessary yet, despite Quelaag's high magic resistance, which turns out to be actually not as high as I thought. And because she is slow, getting attacks in wasn't as difficult, although when you miss, it can lead to some very close calls. Mainly the extended version of the witch's lava puke was my best opportunity. Well, the spider's lava puke, I mean she is fused, so... Or it's actually meant to be part of her body that turned into a spider. Or maybe it was another daughter of Chaos and they are fused together. Oh heck, maybe the spider is the actual witch and she's just attached to it. Meaning it's like the Chaos Witch and Quelaag turned into one being. I mean, the Fair Lady is her sister, so is she a witch? But then wouldn't their brother also be a witch or, well, sorcerer, I guess? Well, but if the spider was another witch, then Quelaag is actually two witches. Or, no, what? Oh, no. Or one of them is not. And the Fair Lady may not be one either. God damn it, even when I'm not playing Bloodborne, I still cannot tell which witch is which witch. Well, when you think about it, one easy solution is to just exterminate them. Then you no longer have to worry about who or what they are. Hey, it's not like the Fair Lady can see it coming. Now, of course, smashing their waifu will make the Sims feel sour. Oh, hi Angie. Yeah, I'll see you later, because first I need to quickly go clubbing with Ceaseless. Although, shy guy as he is, he will need a little incentive to hit the floor. Alright, and now we can warp back again. And there we have another Angie. It's the same one, obviously, although it would have been nice if there were two of them, because then we would have NG and NG+. Oh, by the way, don't use Quelaag's soul, but feed it to Friend instead, because he will give you more souls in return than you would get from popping it yourself. Now, after 30 int, you will get slightly diminished returns, so it might be better to focus on a bit of extra health and endurance first, because it won't be long until we have to face ONS, and Ornstein's speed versus our slow attack while at base level health is not the most pleasant combination. Especially because we still can hardly wear anything at all in order to be light enough to fast roll. Not even with Hevel's Ring. Although mid-rolling is at least fine enough when going through the areas between bosses. But when it comes to taking damage, although these mechanical contraptions were the ones designed to do damage to me, but it was actually the design of the walls which make me take damage, either unintentionally or working as intended. Yeah, it's hard to make sense of this fortress. Now, even though I didn't need the Titanite chunk, I couldn't resist giving the giant on top of the fortress a good spanking, and then it was time to at least make the iron golem sit on his ass, or better yet of course, make him tumble over the edge altogether. Speaking of which, at least compared to the pike charge only run, this time there should be no danger of me accidentally launching myself right off the bridge. Well then again, using an awkward attack like this does feel a bit rough around the edges. So my damage was actually really good, given that the Iron Golem has very high physical defenses, but not so much against elemental damage. And on top of that, his attacks are about as slow as mine. Well, almost. So it should be quite easy to stay out of his hitboxes altogether. What the fuck? But that's something that belongs in the next game. I don't agree with that at all. I guess it's good that I do quite a bit of damage, because I don't know if not meeting the stat requirements has an effect on poison damage, but the golem just wouldn't stagger. And even though his attacks are slow, if you attack him from the front, he can still manage to hit you before you have the chance to get away. But at least it's easy to get out of his reach if you need to drink a— What the hell? I don't agree with that either. Fuck me, is this guy ever going to stagger? Well, I suppose not, so we're just tediously progressing with the speed of taking the ankle express. Oh, now he staggers at the very tail end of the fight. Oh my god. Well, to throw in a little bit of Dunglish for my fellow countrymen among my audience. When it comes to the stagger mechanic, at this point I was bailing like a stagger. Alright, now for a riveting time on the rafters. Fortunately, one-handing makes very little difference in this context anyway, so I can happily block with my shield and then launch myself into the abyss. Okay, maybe that doesn't really work. Also, my save quit actually saved the falling painting guardian as well. Isn't that nice? Well, not to worry, near the forkwell you can avoid the final one by jumping. If you press the jump button at least, which is not the X button yet in this game. Okay, forget about that then. I do still have a shield after all. And the final guardian is on a much wider beam, so there's little chance that I will launch myself over the edge. Especially if he kills me before I even get the chance to attack. Well, I'm sure this is fun for you guys at least, because you cannot spell sadistic laughter without rafter. Okay, second try. And oh fuck, quit out. Hey, what the hell? Okay, that is new. I'm honestly not sure if I've ever been here before. Well, apparently there's at least a staircase over there. I mean, I was afraid that I painted Guardian myself in a corner. What the fuck? Oh, there's actually a chest here? Huh. Not a mimic, fortunately. That would be something. Oh, really? Another one of these fucks? Okay, well, let's hear what you have for me. I mean, the floor is all yours. Huh. That's not what I had in mind, but sure. Well, that is something I like about this game. That the environment allows you to cut corners. Oh, come on! Are you serious right now? Oh, you son of a mother. Yeah, fuck this. I'm done with this area. Ah, that's right. My souls are still up there. Ah, damn it, he's still chasing me. Well, joke's on him, because the moment he reaches the top of the ladder, I will hammer home that I'm not OKKK with this kind. There. Finally. Wow. You know, I can't believe I actually managed to survive that. So, I then made my way to the next bonfire, and no further obstacles, given that we could parry the Silver Knight Archer, just like we did before with Havel. And speaking of Havel, I went down to where his armor set can be found, and I attacked the Mimic there, and how did that not hit? Oh, come on, dude, I can literally see that my hammer is connecting with the Mimic. Well, it turns out that when you don't meet the stat requirements, you cannot do damage to sleeping mimics. Your weapon will simply bounce off. Well, I've said this many times before, you are never done learning in a Souls game. Because all these years, I never knew about that. Unfortunately, we don't need that mimic to begin with. And for the other two upstairs, which hold valuable coins, we can simply obtain those by using a Lloyd Talisman. And in fact, the people thinking ahead will realize that that's actually very important. Well, to be fair, I suppose I should have looked ahead. Because it would have been better if I went to Pinwheel before Anor Londo. Because now I had to face ONS with a slow attack, with an even slower recovery animation. Meaning that I would likely need every drop from my Estus Flask. Especially because the only way for me to fast roll, and have the additional stamina regeneration from the Grasscrash shield, is to wear
Nothing at all! Nothing at all! Nothing at all!
And on top of that, I would be using Power Within to make up for my slow, unwieldy weapon that I can't wield by making my attacks really count. However, that also drains my valuable health bar. Meaning I have to be extra careful. Oh, fuckalicious. Well, that's a nice start. Oh yeah, that's a really nice start. Great camera as well. Oh yeah, definitely exactly what I wanted. Well, at least my slow swings have some really massive impact. However, when your weapon whiffs, you wind up getting walloped by Smough's even more unwieldy weapon. God damn it, I need a drink. Ah, come on! Yeah, in life you don't always get what you need. Which means that facing such a massive threat, that your life is hanging on by a thread. Okay, final hit. Oh fuck, not final hit. Shit, when a close call is this close, it's like a collect call because you're the one paying the price. And yes, I realize that you young whippersnappers watching probably don't even know what that means anymore. Well, second phase at least. Guess I should have picked up the red Tearstone ring. But fortunately, against ONS, the O matters more than the S, because you can easily beat his ass by making him jump over you, by running towards him, so he goes over your head. Requires a little stricter timing than usual, but it means that it's just a matter of patience, rinsing and especially repeating. So, pound for pound for pound, the fat man hits the ground, or something, I don't know, I won at least. Alright, now it's time to collect the Lord Souls, but I realized that I definitely need to save the 4 kings for last, even until after the DLC, because not only would I need to max out my damage, and get enough vitality for tanking, but I wouldn't even be able to tank with Hevel's armor if I didn't have enough endurance to even fat roll without Hevel's ring. Although if really necessary I could use the stone armor instead. By the way, even the Isolef set makes me mid-roll. Speaking of which, apart from that it belongs to a witch, although I don't know which witch, and given that I'm becoming kind of an old man already, I actually have some useless data for you. The Isolef Grim Reaper hood covers only one shoulder, specifically the one you carry your weapon on, and therefore protecting your shoulder. So that reminds you that you don't have to shoulder this burden alone or some far-fetched motivational crap like that. However, what was even more far-fetched and kind of demotivating was what happened next. I obviously went to the Duke's Archives first, given that there I can acquire the final blue titanite I need. But after letting the swine swoop and swing, I swung for not so swell damage. Yeah, that's not gonna work. So I simply made a run for it. After all, it says in the official Dark Souls strategy guide that these boars are designed to not follow you up the elevator and turn back to their starting position. However, they did not take into account that armored metallic apparently magic resistant boars are not exactly known for their reading abilities, meaning they weren't aware of what was written in the official strategy guide. And I thought getting stuck in an elevator with someone who ripped a giant fart was the worst thing that could happen. However, someone acting like a disgusting pig is nothing compared to an actual pig who is disgusted by your audacity of trying to stay alive without his strict written permission. Although in fairness he wouldn't be able to read it. So therefore I followed through on that audacity, if that's even proper English, and made it to the next elevator. Duke skipped on the first attempt, just wanted to emphasize that, and then made it to the next bonfire. Well, even though they are boars, they are not boring at least. And it just goes to show how you can run into some peculiar design quirks in this game. In fact, I immediately encountered another example. There is not enough room to move through here, unless you move the other way around. Because that magically means there's more space available, right? Well, speaking of magic, now we could finally pick up the magic stones to max out our magic stick. And in turn, speaking of picking up stones, there's a set of 20 prism stones that can come in handy on the meandering invisible walkways towards the blue titanite slab. But before that, if you continue forward down the normal route, rather than going left, there's a chunk behind the second golden golem, and if you turn around after dropping onto the walkway towards Seath, you can get more crystals from the crystal lizard. Oh fuck. Shit, this is going to be a problem. Well, if you turn around, we can just quit. Okay, let's go for the slab first. It's a complicated route, but you can easily make it across using the prism stones. And okay, so as I was saying, we were killing crystal lizards. And fuck me. Yeah, took longer to get here than to defeat most bosses, but we have the titanite slab. Although now we need to make our way back again. But when you think about it, it's just the same thing in reverse. There's no additional danger. What the fuck? Can you just fall off? How did the AI suddenly become smart enough to follow an invisible pathway? Not that these guys have eyes or anything. Fuck this, we have to quit out anyway to respawn the crystal lizards. Oh my god, this sucks. Huh. Okay, it killed itself by falling through the floor. Well, that does give me inspiration. Damn it, I hate these things. Next time I see a crystal lizard, I will make sure to get my revenge. Basically, they are the insects of this world. I fundamentally disagree with them existing, whether they serve a valuable purpose or not. But even though my weapon was fully upgraded now, my SS was still at a max of 10, even though it was actually easy to double that. Although not so easy to get there in the first place, son of a fucking biscuit. Well, actually, Pinwheel was not as easy as you would expect, given how slow I attack. Now, granted, it was nothing compared to the absolute mayhem that ensued in my Pike Charge only run, But Pinwheel got at least a chance to do his patented flamethrower attack, which, based on the responses I got on the Park Judge video, was apparently not even widely known that he had that ability in the first place. Even less known is that he has a second phase. And I don't know, maybe in the oldest patches of this game that wasn't even a thing yet. And I'm never a fan of when they add patches to a game. But I am a fan of the Silver Pendant, so I acquired a light source for when we inevitably reach a DLC. But we're not going there yet. First it was obviously time to get rid of Seath. And I thought he might pose a problem because he is incredibly resistant to magic. And we can only inflict almost pure magic damage. And yes indeed, the damage was not that impressive. Moreover, I could only attack once per opportunity. But regardless, this fight was no problem at all. It only took a very long time. And that's because even though Seath is highly important to the story, as a boss he is not exactly much of a threat with his very limited moveset. I mean, I guess that's why he's called Seath the Scaleless. So, long story short, the fight was long, but there wasn't much to it. But hey, that's okay, because we're not only collecting souls to progress, but also to increase our stats for the boss fights that will prove to be an obstacle. So it's best to get the easier ones out of the way first, and therefore I went to Isolith next. In fact, because I was in human form, I got invaded by Captain Kirk, and defeating him grants you way more souls than you would expect from a simple NPC invasion. And on top of that, for those who are PC exclusive and are still waiting for Bloodborne, you may not be able to use the Kirk hammer, but at least you can hammer Kirk. And when it comes to the boss fights here, I can be very short, because the Demon Fire Sage is basically the same as the Stray Demon before, although a little bit more of a spacing and therefore a timing issue because of the arena. And the Centipede was particularly jumpy today. Not surprising, I guess, when you smash someone's toes, although I'm actually smashing his ankles, and therefore it is surprising because good luck jumping with broken ankles. Well, whatever may be the case. Despite my slow attacks, I still managed to take down this boss without getting hit a single time in the process. Yeah, who cares about stats? I know exactly what I'm doing, which makes me invincible. Oh fuck, I forgot to equip the ring, didn't I? Huh. Well, I'm sure that's the only time something like that will happen in this playthrough. And that it wouldn't be a precedent for another rare ring-related ruination of the rear end. Although, speaking of which, the Bed of Chaos, otherwise known as the Marriage Bed, but also the name of the upcoming boss fight, would not be different from a regular playthrough, but that merely entails that it's the same amount of bullshit like it always is. Oh, by the way, while we're here anyway, let's backstab the daughter of No, I said backstab, not stab. Yeah, your mother is the identity of the Bed of Chaos, and it sure is very bad and very chaotic. God damn it. Yeah, I don't feel so lucky anymore in this playthrough, but now I get another opportunity to backstab the NPC. So maybe I can turn things around. No, not you turning around. I didn't even hit to begin with. Yeah. Well, I would want to say 3 times a shipwright, but then I realized that I already made a Dunglish joke in the script, so let's just ignore the NPC, and then I finally first tried the Bed of Chaos. Would have been one hell of a kick in the nuts, by the way, if you would swung just over the Chaos bug. But fortunately they were saving their bad hit detection for the next installment. Although they should have done the same thing with the Iron Golem's grab attack, I suppose. Now, although I didn't need any upgrade materials anymore, after the Crystal Lizard shenanigans from before, it was time to get my revenge. So the way I handled Nito is by simply tanking through the fight with the stone armor instead of using my usual Ring of Fog and Slumbering Ring strategy, where I sacrificed the Fab Ring to prevent having to deal with the skeletons. Actually, in principle, it would have been possible to get a second Demon Great Hammer and give it a Divine Infusion, because you can in fact trade a Butcher's Sack with the Crows for a Demon Hammer. But I didn't exactly feel like handling anyone's sack today. But of course, another thing that is unpleasant to handle is the sadness of beating a lovely dog like dear old Sif to death. With in a way the added insult that as long as you stay underneath him, it's not even that much different from fighting him under regular circumstances. So to preserve the understandably fragile mental state of the audience, I will beat a bottle of Sif instead. Okay, that was really stupid, but at least it was way less depressing. Oh, it's limping. Well, something that will definitely make me feel better is to finally get revenge on the Crystal Lizard. So it was time to now enter the DLC, and although the Hydra was surprisingly not that much of an obstacle, well, except for the final heads of course, which always seem to land inconveniently far away from you, but at least I did really good damage against it. However, that did not apply to the Golden Crystal Golem. Apparently, its magic resistance is through the roof, turning this slightly beefed up enemy into an actual boss fight this time. In fact, this has to be the first time in all these years that when fighting this golem, that I even had to resort to using humanity because I ran out of Estus. Wow, that was one hell of a fight just to access the DLC. Would be a real kick in the nuts if I would now accidentally hit the R1 button in front of Dusk and lock myself out of the DLC. Oh, whoa, that's not what I wanted. Fuck. I didn't want to smash her like that. Oh, please tell me that this doesn't actually lock me out of the DLC, right? Well, at least after a slightly less lengthy fight, the Blue Crystal Golem did still drop the Broken Pendant. So, now it's the moment of truth. Would I finally get my revenge on the Crystal Lizard? But would I be able to access the DLC? And yes. Yes, I could. Definitely dodged the bullet there. Although it would have been better if Dusk simply dodged my very slow moving hammer. Wouldn't exactly have been that hard to do. I mean, if enemies can do it, why can't she? And speaking of which, now we're in the DLC, there are no more easy fights ahead. Because these bosses have much shorter windows of opportunity for attacks. And another problem is that not fighting with lock-on is usually helpful in these fights, in my experience at least. But in this case, that can easily result in swinging in the wrong direction and having to deal with the extra long recovery animation. Moreover, windows of opportunity don't mean the same thing when your attack is this slow. Because what is safe near the start of the animation is not necessarily safe near the end of it, but before you can move again. Also, not the same attack opportunities apply, like after the 4-hit combo. Fortunately, the Sanctuary Guardian doesn't have the same elemental defenses the other 3 bosses have, nor a similar large health pool. So when taking advantage of the few attack opportunities you do get, you can in fact inflict massive damage. Headbutts, especially after allowing you to get struck by the non-damaging wave, given that you can react just in time despite getting staggered by it, which is essentially always the best opportunity. And after the swoop, as long as the angle is right, you can actually still cut off his tail. You know, with a blunt object. And afterwards you can be even more blunt by bunking his bottom. Oh, or maybe you should at least ask first before doing something like that. So yeah, it's definitely more awkward than fighting under normal circumstances, as he will recover often before you can. But at least you have damage opportunities to work with, and a very decent damage output. And also very important, you at least get some safe opportunities to heal. But I know of a certain someone who doesn't really like to play by those rules. Of course, first we need to actually get to him, and perhaps, unlike with Dusk, I can press R1 a little less accidentally in front of Elizabeth to get my hands on those precious mushrooms. I mean, she doesn't really serve any other purpose after all.
Perfect.
Yes, excellent.
What the fuck? Why is she already dead? Could it perhaps be because I killed Dusk, even though that happened in the future? I mean, this is not the order of events that should take place, but, you know, time is convoluted. And I still get my mushrooms. So, for anyone who would have gotten angry at me for killing her, you can be happy now because she killed herself. Yay! Well, against Artorias, even though he would be the one doing all the killing, it was my slow attack, and specifically the slow recovery time, that basically turned this into pure suicide. Although my damage was surprisingly high, given Artorias' defenses, but in all fairness it simply didn't matter. Because there were no safe attack opportunities, other than just getting lucky where Artorias just happens to not attack you, even though he had every opportunity to. But at any time he could counterattack immediately after I got damage in, or he could simply dodge my attack and I would be stuck in the recovery animation, giving him enough time to watch the Godfather trilogy first. And I definitely couldn't tank my way through the fight, because it would take at least 2 attacks to break his buffing animation, which wouldn't be possible. So here I was in my underwear, not exactly looking buff, while he kept stacking buff upon buff. Not even Havel's armor would be able to help me here. However, there was one attack that I could almost consistently punish, namely his somersault, but only if he would do it at least twice, or if he would do the sludge attack afterwards. Well, even that was not 100% safe, but at least in this case, a counterattack was actually rare. Unfortunately, that meant that I not only had to wait until he did his somersault attack, which he doesn't spam that much to begin with, but specifically the version where he follows up. So that's even less common. Now, fortunately, you can actually influence this a bit by positioning yourself in front of him. However, that does mean that if your spacing is off, you will get squashed by the follow-up instead of outstrafing it. Yes, I have definitely had lengthy Artorias fights before, but this was the first time where the fight took over 15 minutes while doing over 230 damage per attack. So you can imagine that I ended up doing a somersault myself when the fight finally came to an end. So, with Manus and Kalameet remaining, there was a problem lurking around the corner. Namely the crash key hidden inside the Mimic. Given that I would not be able to do damage to the Mimic, just like before in Anor Londo. But fortunately, I still had Lloyd Talisman in my inventory. So that would give me access to Kalameet, but for Manus I made sure to pick up the Silver Pendant. Now I'm often asked why I always use that one only for the forward moving projectile barrage, but not for the other two dark attacks. Well, I will explain that in a few minutes, but then something unexpected happened. One of the sorcerers dropped a catalyst. A ridiculously rare drop. Like over a year ago I wanted to do a run focused around poison, so I wasted literal hours farming for this catalyst, but they never dropped it. And now randomly I happened to get it in a run where I had no use for it. There is definitely no poison more intense than the entire concept of random drops in my opinion. Regardless, now it was time for the worst Manus since Dennis Duh. And again, damage output wasn't as bad as you would expect. However, this boss has one hell of a massive health pool. And although it was nowhere near as bad as against Artorias, but having a slow attack with a long recovery did change how I would have to handle my attack opportunities. Some which you would expect to be viable were not. Like the giant wombo combo that couldn't be safely punished anymore. Or you might literally not even connect in time. But even his regular hand slam attacks required me to turn the camera and aim for the actual hand in order to hit it when he was about to pull it back again. Although later on I noticed that dodging to the left gives you a slightly larger window of opportunity. And speaking of turning around, in order to punish the uppercut, I had to specifically aim my character towards Manus before attacking, otherwise there was a high likelihood that I would swing in the opposite direction. Remember that you don't have a roll attack when you don't meet the stat requirements. So in the first phase I had to be more patient than usual since attack opportunities were less frequent and more awkward to punish effectively. And in the second phase, 2 of his 3 dark attacks are not punishable at all. However, that's the same as always. And just like in a normal playthrough, the circle one is still punishable even with a slow attack, because Manus always growls after he does that move. So since that is an attack opportunity, that's why I never use the Silver Pendant against that move. I only use it for the forward moving barrage, and in case you wonder why I always outrun the Dark Rain rather than use the talisman for that, well, that's because this can happen, where a projectile can get stuck upon your defensive aura, and then when it dissipates, it can still fall down upon you. I mean, you can already easily experience some really close calls in this fight without doing that, so there's definitely no need to create even more. So, afterwards, I mean, this is in the past after all. Dusk is on the ground, and well, it was an accident before, but What, seriously? So, I can hit her by accident, but not intentionally. Huh. Well, I guess that preserves the timeline, because it looks like she's going to survive. Psych. It just required the right angle. Waifu abuse. Well, the DLC is not over yet until Kalameet meets his end. Unfortunately, despite my damage output being okay-ish, given his massive resistance to magic, the fight turned quickly into quite a calamity, because the long recovery time, even when you successfully get a hit in, might still be too long to get out of the way in time. But all in all, I was getting drunk on Estus, and given how long the fight takes like this, I was getting dangerously close to running out. When timing becomes this precise, Kalameet will hold your feet to the fire. Now you can get the most damage in when he stands upon his hind legs, but if you thought his height was iron, his claws spears and his wings a hurricane, then his balls are made of solid steel apparently. At the very least, after the swoop, you can still get a hit in by, instead of going for the tail, you simply bonk his bottom, but apparently nothing could save me from reaching the bottom of my own flask. Oh, the humanity. Well, with the DLC done, there's still one obstacle left that I purposely saved for last. Because I wanted to make sure that I can handle the DPS race against the 4 kings. But first I acquired 2 more Firekeeper souls to upgrade my Estus, and then I haveled my way through the ghost house, because I'm obviously not able to kill Ingrid from a distance. Moreover, when you get here after the Lord Vessel, you don't need to kill him anyway. But something that I would probably need is Power Within to maximize my damage output. However, as I learned back in my Straightsword Hill run, Power Within cannot be used when Transcendent Curse is active. So you have to wait for it to wear off before jumping down into the abyss. Yeah, I learned that the hard way, but I'm aware now. And I'm not going to forget something like that. Alright, so now I can go down and... Fuck, I forgot to equip the ring, didn't I? Well, it's not the only thing about rings that nobody is paying attention to lately. And I guess at least I have all of my Estus flasks now. And it's a good thing I saved this fight for last. Because my damage output was good, but speed obviously was not. However, that's where the Havel strategy comes in order to tank my way through it. Although that still requires you to actually hit the kings. And for some reason I would miss seemingly randomly, and no idea what causes this. But under these circumstances, you would more consistently hit the boss if you're not locked on. And because I didn't realize that initially, this did cause me to waste a lot of time. So now I definitely had to make haste, or better said, simply hope for decent RNG, because there was not exactly much I could do to speed things up anyway. Well, it's not exactly uncommon for the 4 Kings fight to be about pure RNG in a challenge run. Well, I hate to end things in an anticlimactic way, but unlike the Pike Charge only run, where we ended with the hardest fight, because we couldn't riposte, but that is one thing that this time our handicapped moveset does allow us to do. And I didn't even have to awkwardly two-hand after a parry. In fact, under these circumstances that wouldn't have increased the damage anyway. And evidently doing almost pure magic damage is more effective than physical damage. Heck, given the lack of scaling that Fire Infusion has, it even seems to be the better choice despite Gwyn's weakness to fire. So, yeah, that's it. Bit of an anticlimactic ending, but yes, the Demon Great Hammer is very awkward to use like this, making it not exactly a great hammer, but you can at least call it the Demon's decent hammer. If you enjoyed this video, consider liking, subscribing and leaving a comment below. And if you want to support the channel, you can become a channel member or support me on Patreon. And of course, check out the Discord server to hang out with our fine community. Thanks for watching and I will see you all next time.
My lord, bless thy safe return. Let Carth and Fraft serve your highness. We are here to serve your highness.